Sound is speeding on a new episode of the Producer Podcast. Today, I'm welcoming producer Steve Barnett to the show as we dive into his producer journey and producing the faith-based musical A Week Away. So warm up those singing voices and let's get started. Welcome, Steve, to the Producer Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So to start, I'd love to just kind of hear a little bit about how you got started in the industry and how the producer realm of things is where you landed.
Yeah, I always wanted to, since I was young, I wanted to be in the film business. I think that the spark for me was when I was about 13. That was, and I'm older, so this might seem weird to some of your younger listeners, but back in the day when they had newspapers delivered to your house every day, I would read the box office numbers every Monday, and it was actually every Tuesday because the delay of getting the final numbers on Sunday. I was obsessed with that. I was also an athlete, but this was like another thing that I would follow, almost like sports. And I remember reading an article about a producer named Brian Grazier and a young filmmaker at the time named Ron Howard, they were doing the first live action film for Disney Studios. Disney had just opened a new division called Touchstone.
Okay.
And their first film was going to be this film called Splash. And again, you may not even know that film, but it starred
No.
Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks was a young actor at the time. Ron Howard had made one film, and Brian Grazier was a young producer, just kind of making his way and getting stuff done. And this was a big risk for Disney because it was the first live action film, and it was kind of. I remember them thinking it was kind of a goofy idea. It was a modern day fairy tale about a young man, Tom Hanks, who falls in love with a woman who then finds out that this woman is actually a mermaid who has
Hmm.
come onto land and has become a woman. And so he falls in love with her. And it was just a cute romantic comedy. And I remember seeing the movie, and the movie ended up making a lot of money. And kind of the rest is history for Touchstone. And frankly, for Tom Hanks's career, for Ron Howard's career, and for Brian Grazier's career, it really launched all of them. And yeah, I was just kind of hooked by the business of the film business at that point, as well as just a fan of film. So that was the spark. And then I went off to college, and I was at UCLA and decided to do a summer, not even a summer intern, I did an internship during school. And I was lucky enough to work for a producer named John Davis. And John is a huge producer. Has done, just a ton of big studio films. So I got a chance to understand the business from the inside now.
Hmm.
And again, equally as hooked with the creative process as well as the business side of it. And so my career path has been one through the development side of the business. And what that means is, I started as an assistant and reading scripts and doing coverage and all of that stuff. And then participate in meetings, creative meetings, became a young executive, became a creative executive pretty quickly. I found a script that we ended up selling to Fox
Okay.
at a pretty young age. I was an assistant for only 9 months, and I got
Wow.
promoted to a creative executive pretty quickly. I was at a different company. I kind of bounced around from company to company uh, over the I don't know 15 years of my career. Just keep getting better and bigger jobs.
Hmm.
So learning to do the development, the script development, the story development, working with the writers, working with the filmmakers to mold these things into, a script that would you could go off and shoot. That was the beginning of my career. Yeah, then I'll just keep going. And then
Sure.
I transitioned. The next step for anyone in that position is to go on set and watch what you worked on in black and white on paper turn into images on film. And it
Hmm.
was a whole new experience. And I've been lucky over my career to be both the person who's in the trenches on the at the script stage, and hopefully developing and telling great stories on paper that can translate into film. The next step though was to understand the moving parts of a production and
Right.
how those work with the screenplay you've developed. So and sometimes they don't, and especially back then where visual effects was a lot more expensive and everything was just a lot more expensive, uh,
Hmm.
to just because technology wasn't quite as accessible and as inexpensive as it is now. So, oftentimes you would develop something in a screenplay that was just like way too expensive. So you had to roll your sleeves up and rework things to, have a screenplay that's more in line with something you could actually afford to make. That was a skill that I learned. Uh, and I was lucky enough to be able to see both sides of the production process, both the development written word side as well as
Hmm.
the side behind the camera. So it was I was fortunate in that way. And then I, and I got to apologize. I could literally talk about this stuff all day because I love my job.
Oh, no,
Um,
that's awesome.
but after I learned how to produce on set with the filmmakers and watching them interact with the actors and stuff, then it became, what about financing? How does financing work? How do how do you go rally up the money to make these movies, and how do you then be efficient with how you spend the money to make sure you're getting everything on screen that the people who are financing the movie have what they expect from the
Hmm.
film. And then it goes on and on, man. It gets into distribution, which is a whole different thing. Foreign sales, which is a whole different thing. Tax credits in various states around the country and the world,
Yeah,
and then marketing. So there's a lot to do as a producer. There's no question about it.
that's for sure. Um, I'd love to jump back a little bit more to what you're talking about where how you were learning when developing a script, to also make it work with what was financially possible. And just like when you're working on projects, like what questions or things are you really paying attention to help bring those two things together, a good story, but also something that makes sense from the finance side?
Yeah, I mean, you always want to start with character. The truth is, your movie's only going to be as good as the script, right? So, and,
Hmm.
and that's both on a creative, emotional, thematic level, but also on a financial level. So they really are kind of a little bit of church and state with regard to, creative versus financial. But that's my job. My job is to make sure that we can bring those two together and make sure that we can afford what we've got on the page. So with that in mind, it's the kind of thing where you're like, look, first of all, the script's too long, or you've got this incredibly expensive location for one scene.
Hmm.
you know, maybe either lose that location, turn it into something that's a little bit more accessible and less expensive, or be at that location more. So you're at least getting,
Hmm.
you're getting more bang for your buck because it's going to cost the same. I mean, it might cost, more if you're there for multiple days, but that's money better spent than spending a ton of money on a small scene at a big location.
Right.
So consolidating scenes, that's always a huge goal is to try and find a way to eliminate scenes that might feel a little bit redundant or combine them with scenes so you're more efficient with the storytelling. Same with characters, eliminating characters that may cost you a lot of money that don't appear in the movie as much or the series as much or provide enough of an impact to the story, the themes, the characters,
Mhm.
whatever. So it's really just it's in some ways it's just the process of efficiency without sacrificing theme, humor, and emotion.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Then, and you kind of got into this some in kind of telling your story, but like the term producer can be very ambiguous in the industry. So, like, what are kind of some of the main aspects of the producer that you normally find yourself doing, and how did you figure out those were like where you best fit into the filmmaking puzzle?
Yeah, there's no question that um, there's a lot of different roles a producer can have, and whether you pay if you pay attention to the credits, oftentimes you'll see a lot of producers. I mean,
Hmm.
you'll just see, sometimes you might see one or two, and sometimes you might see 20, literally 20. And the truth is, there's only really one or two real producers on a movie, maybe
Hmm.
three at the most. And frankly, that's why the Producers Guild of America has decided that, for the Academy Awards and any awards, really, the the producers who actually provide the on-set services will be the ones who go up on stage to accept an award. So there's a whole process that you have to go through with you don't have to, but a lot of producers prefer it to go through the PGA to get what's called their PGA mark, which
Right.
basically qualifies you to receive awards. And that really is confirmation that you were one of a maximum of three producers who contributed the most in making the film. Um, you know, I have been lucky in my career to be that producer, to be the person who's from beginning to end, really,
Hmm.
uh, not controlling it, but managing it, and working with all the other producers, working with the filmmaker, and all the department heads and everybody. That's how I've done my job forever. But a producer might also be somebody who found a book or an idea or found a script, found the original material, and had ownership of it, and through that ownership was able to leverage their way into getting a producer credit, but not providing any services beyond that.
Right.
That happens a lot. And the truth is there's a lot of credits, a lot of producer credits, co-producer, associate producer, some of the other producer credits, that even executive producer, that are kind of given away to folks in lieu of higher producer fees.
Hmm.
And that has become a very common thing that drives people crazy, but I get it, because we've had to do it as well, where you've got somebody who has some sort of connection to the underlying material or the chain of title, which is the underlying rights to any movie or TV is called the chain of title.
Hmm.
And then they have some sort of control over that, or even a piece of it. You need that person to sign over their rights to the company that's financing and ultimately producing the show. And they'll say, "Oh, I need a producer credit." And you're like, "Fine, take the producer credit. Just we need you to sign this piece of paper." Sadly, that is a reality. And we try very hard at my company to make sure that the people that are getting credits are actually earning those credits.
Right.
So, but sometimes there's just no way. You got to settle, and you got to give away credits where people are not really going to contribute much of anything other than on the very, very front end.
Yeah.
And financiers, the people who are coming in and financing the movie, they usually get an executive producer credit in
Hmm.
film. Credits are all different for TV, but financiers will come in and get an executive producer credit, or if it's somebody who's selling off the foreign rights and contributing financing that way, may also get an executive producer credit. So yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to know what any producer really does. And trust me, it's like for years. My mom has finally figured it out after all these years, but probably the first 15 years, she's like, "What is it you do again?" And I'm like, "Oh boy, okay." So yeah, it's
Yeah.
confusing.
Yep. I can relate. I'm still trying to explain what a producer does to
Yeah.
my friends and family.
I do think that Producers Guild of America mark is a step in the right direction, at least for
Hmm.
clarity. At least for clarity, so people go,
Yes,
"Oh, that person has a mark next to their name. They must have been doing something." So
definitely. So then I want to take some time to look at the film A Week Away that you helped produce several years ago. And I guess maybe the best place to start, obviously, if people have seen the film, it's a musical. Had you ever done a musical before that project, or was that like your first venture into that genre?
that was my first musical, and I've since then I think I've done three,
Okay.
three or four. We're about to start. production on the series spin-off of A Week Away. It's actually not really a spin-off. I mean, it is a spin-off in a lot of ways, but it's a whole new cast. And
Okay.
it's a different story than the film, but it's the same location. There will be one character who is the same, that kind of
Hmm.
connects us to the movie. But yeah, musicals are different. I'm not gonna lie, like they're really hard, man. They're harder than a regular film by a lot. Like they're much more difficult.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is you've got a lot of pre-production is completely different.
Okay.
In addition to regular pre-production, which I'm sure you're familiar with, you've now got dance rehearsal. You've got a full staff of dancers who are creating the dance sequences. You've got a whole bunch of people that you just don't have in a regular film pre-production that requires ADs at work. I mean, way in advance of principal photography, you've got recording of music, you've got uh, music being created, you've got a whole bunch of things that you just don't really have to deal with on a regular film. Which it's fun because I will say that the musicals that I've made have been the most fun to produce
Okay.
because I mean people singing and dancing and music and that's a lot of fun energy on the day,
Yes.
but the pre-production and all of the hoops you have to jump through with the unions to mount a musical versus a regular film is it's a lot, man. It's a lot.
I guess one question that I have is like, what was maybe one of the biggest things that surprised you back then making your first musical? Like, you didn't realize this or understand this until you went to have to do it, and then you're like, oh, wow.
Honestly, this is the most boring answer, but it is what it is. Dealing with the union, dealing with SAG, dealing with SAG, the pressure of having your SAG agreement in place early on, because I
Hmm.
mean, if you're not dealing with choreography and music recording, you don't need to have your SAG agreement locked and loaded until actors show up for rehearsal a week before, or if you don't have
Right.
rehearsal, the day of principal photography. So you have all of prep to get through that. So that's one of the big differences. And that's literally what I'm in the middle of right now. Literally right
Ooh.
now, I am going back and forth with the Screen Actors Guild, making sure that they have all the documents they need and that they have all the assurances that they need for their members.
Hmm.
6 weeks before we start production. So, yeah, that's not the best, that's not the most exciting answer, but that was one of the things that caught me off guard was how much you have to do up front with the guilds,
Hmm.
with Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah, no,
Um, and
that's a
then
good one.
but on the fun side, I was surprised by how much fun it was.
Hmm.
Even though it can be challenging and stressful and all the things that come out of having to rush a SAG agreement and hiring a lot of people before you normally do. They're singing and dancing. I mean, that's cool. It's fun.
Yes.
So that's the upside of the whole thing. And I was surprised by that. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the process of making a musical.
So then, I guess for you, like as a producer, when you, how did you know like this was a story worth telling? Because especially at the time that A Week Away was made, that like there wasn't a lot of musicals being made in the more like family faith-based space, and the ones that usually were like super cheesy cringe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like how did you know, oh yeah, this is a story worth the time and energy to actually do?
Well, it's that's a really good question because I recognized that nobody had done one yet, or pretty early on, and I got that idea from it was kind of two ideas collided,
Okay.
and that was my light bulb moment. The first was I had just done a movie with a Christian band called For King and Country.
Hmm.
It was a movie called Priceless, and not a musical at all. In fact, very very intense drama about sex trafficking and human trafficking, and it starred Joel Smallbone, who's the lead singer of the band, and directed by his brother Ben, who just had Homestead out. I don't know if you've talked to Ben or not, but
I've not, no.
great guy. You should talk to him. He's amazing. So
Okay.
anyway, so I made that film, and I was looking for something else to do with them. And obviously, they're a popular band. I think an incredibly talented band, and a great family. If you know anything about them, they're a huge family.
Hmm.
And at the same time, The Greatest Showman came out, and The Greatest Showman came out, and I loved the film, but it opened horribly. I don't know if you remember this, but it came out and kind of was like a dud. Like it was a big hyped up movie that just did not make a lot of noise when it came out, and the studio freaked out. And then it kept going and going and going and going. And that movie had some incredible legs at the box office.
Hmm.
And I remember talking to a bunch of friends who, Christian families, parents of these Christian families, and they kept bringing, "Did you see The Greatest Showman?" And I was like, "Yeah, I loved it." And they're like, "Well, it's kind of a Christian film." And I was like, "What? Nah, is it? Not really."
Yes.
And then I started to look at it, and I thought to myself, "Wow, you know what? Obviously, they didn't market it that way, and nor did they intend for it to be a faith adjacent, faith based, whatever you want to say
Hmm.
about that film. But thematically, it had storylines, and it had character issues that did fit into, and choices that were made by those characters, like turning his back on the potential of infidelity, creating a safe haven and a home for the unwanted. Um, that movie has Christian themes in it. It's
Right.
just it's just sneaky in that way, you know. And again, I don't think they intended to do that, but that's kind of that was the light bulb moment for me. I was like, that's how you do this. You make a movie that isn't in your face, proselytizing,
Hmm.
but it takes themes that at the end of the day are Christian themes, but also just good human themes, and you do it that way. So I was developing a project with the writer, actually one of the writers of Priceless, a guy named Chris Dowling, who has made quite a few films in this space, and he's a great guy. He had a script called Undone that was about a homeless guy in Venice who did something miraculous, and people caught it on film, and he becomes kind of social. He goes viral for doing something miraculous.
Hmm.
And he's got long hair and a beard. He looks like Jesus, and people they thought he was the second coming of Jesus. And he becomes this kind of popular figure online, and he kind of just goes with it, you know, like people are giving him stuff. He's not hungry anymore. he's and he's saying he's saying things that are really touching people. And that for him though, it was his journey to discovering his faith based
Hmm.
on what he was contributing to people. I was like, dude, let's make that a musical. And Chris was like, huh? And I'm like, I'm telling you, we can take, like not like Greatest Showman did, because Greatest Showman was all original music. But I was like,
Right.
let's go get some Switchfoot music. Let's go get some Toby Mac. Let's get some For King and Country, and we'll reinvent those songs, and we'll do a jukebox musical that hangs on this idea of a young man who's down and out, who has an opportunity to change lives, and does, and in the process changes his own life. So we developed that, and I was so excited about this. I mean, just thrilled about where we were going with it. And then I met with, as a favor, I met with a guy named Alan Powell, who is my partner at Monarch Media. And Alan, we get together, and he's out there hustling like everybody. He's pitching these ideas, and I'm passing on everything. And then he pitches this idea about doing a jukebox musical set at a summer camp, at a Christian summer camp. And I was like, ooh, okay, that's in the same space as what I was doing. But he had done a proof of concept video that he
Okay.
sent over. And I was like, man, this is actually really good. I mean, it was, they went to the woods and they shot a guy singing, or a guy and a girl
Hmm.
singing. I think it was a place, yeah, they were singing A Place in This World. And I was like, A, I knew a musical in this space using existing existing music would work by seeing its proof of concept.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about Christian camp. I did not go to Christian camp. I went to like sports camp or whatever,
Uh-huh.
right? So I didn't understand the culture. And so I said, there's something really interesting in your church camp project. So I came onto that project as a producer to help those guys. It was Alan Powell and a guy named Gabe Vasquez. And yeah, I said, let's develop this. So I applied all those development skills I told you about, and we developed a screenplay. And he called me out of the blue one day. He's like, I think I might have somebody to invest in to finance this movie. And I was like, all right, cool. Call her, see what she's thinking. He calls me back and he's like, she's in. And I was like, what? I mean, he literally called back like 3 minutes later. He's like, she's in.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. I mean, for how much does she? You didn't tell her a budget number, did you? He's like, oh no, how much? And we'll tell her this number, and this much will go towards production. We need a little bit of extra for print P&A for a distribution
Mhm.
plan. And he calls me back another 3 minutes later. He's like, she's in. I was like, oh boy, okay. I've been down this road a bunch where people claim to have money and
Mhm.
they commit, and they don't really have the money, or they're just kicking tires or whatever. He goes, well, she wants to come down and meet for dinner. I said, great. So we got together, we met. Our third partner at Monarch, Vicky Patel, who is an incredible human. And she was the real deal, man. She was like, I love this. I think this could be so much fun. What do you need? And yeah, we did a deal on that movie in like a week or two. She transferred money into a bank account, and we started to make the movie. And while we were making the movie, she reached out to Alan and said, Alan, this is great. I'm so excited what you guys are doing. This movie's going to be awesome. I want to do movies. I want to do more than one. And how do we,
Nice.
how do we do that? And so he calls me. He's like, dude, she wants to do more than one. I was like, great, let's form a company. So, so she's not just a bank, because a lot of times, somebody with money who wants to invest in films is just kind of viewed as a checkbook.
Right.
And I knew that isn't. I had an instinct that isn't what Vicky wanted, and frankly, I didn't think that was a wise move for her, because again, like, there's a lot of producers in Hollywood who just take your money and never talk to you again, and or
Hmm.
just invite you to the premiere and really never know you. And I knew that she wanted to be in the middle of it all, and frankly, I wanted her to be. I wanted to form a company that was a real production company that not just had a seat at the table, but it was our table. You know what I mean? We were inviting
Yes.
people to the table, and she was down. She was down, and we got together. I don't know, a couple weeks later, and her people came down to LA, and we had a big meeting, and we all agreed to do it. And we had a deal for Monarch Media within 5 weeks, and we were up and running. And
Nice.
that was the beginning of Monarch Media, and that actually paralleled and kind of then dovetailed the into A Week Away, our first film.
That's awesome. So you mentioned kind of talking there how, you knew doing this film you wanted to take existing, songs to kind of fill the project. So I'm just curious, like, how much was the script influencing, like, what songs you were trying to get versus, the songs that you were able to get licensed influencing the script?
Well, on Undone, which by the way never got made, sadly, that was 100% me and Chris, uh, just kind of like creating storylines and the plot and the character arcs, and looking at what themes were at play and what songs
Hmm.
fit those moments. We had Laura Daigle, we had all these huge numbers. So that was that. But on A Week Away, it was kind of the same but different. Um, Alan and Gabe had been working on that project for a while, and they came. So when it came to me, it already had those songs,
Okay.
or at least the songs they wanted for those moments kind of already in the screenplay.
Hmm.
And then it just became a matter of going licensing them and making sure that we could afford to get those licenses. But there was one or two, there were one or two songs that we did add after we had the script, and the one that I'm most proud of, and I think it's a really good story, and I think it really shows. I think it really shows that God had His hand on A Week Away from the beginning, but all the way through it.
Hmm.
There's a mashup of Awesome God and God Only Knows
Hmm.
in the movie at the worship night at the bonfire. Bailey Madison, who's incredible, does this little speech and then starts singing um, "Awesome God," and the male lead, who's got a crush on her, and he's moved by what she had said prior to singing, starts then singing the first verse of God Only Knows. And those two songs, I think, work incredibly well together. At least what our music producer, Adam Watts, did with it made it incredible. And quick little story, that didn't come about until we were pretty far into prep, right?
Okay.
I don't know, we might have been 2 weeks out from shooting. We had the entire crew, or excuse me, had the entire cast, main cast, rehearsing at the Camp Widgiewagon here in Nashville.
Hmm.
And we had the Jam Shack, which is just literally a building that we turned into the recording studio that was right across from the choreography, and the actors, and they would go back and forth between dancing and singing. The way it goes is Alan Powell, my partner at Monarch and the writer of A Week Away, uh, was pulled into the recording studio and Adam Watts, our music producer, and he says, "You got to hear this. Just sit down. I'm not going to tell you anything." And
Hmm.
they played back the first take, the very first, only one take of the song with Kevin Quinn's vocals, and it was perfect. It was like those two songs wanted to be together.
Hmm.
I don't remember ever having that experience or during the creative process where it was just like, woof, wow, that was like perfection on the first shot.
Yeah.
That was magical, man. That was a magical moment, and then only to be topped, frankly, by the day that we shot it, and the emotion and with the entire cast and crew, and the background was so into it. The way Roman White shot that moment. Um, I got to tell you, and this sounds crazy and probably pretty arrogant at the time. I might even still feel this way. I remember saying to someone, I think it might have been to Alan, I don't know who it was, but I was like, I think we just created the best moment in any Christian film ever made. I was that excited about it. I was like, this was so good that I think we just hit this out of the park, and it might be the best moment from any Christian film of all time. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, that's a pretty big statement and probably not true, but that's what I hope everybody gets when
Yes.
they get a chance to produce, direct, act in, that you walk away from a night where you just did something that was magical. That's the coolest feeling you can ever have as a creative, I think.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I don't know if I've had any of those moments yet myself, but I've heard other stories about when
Yeah,
those happen, and they're
it's
always
pretty
great.
it was pretty special. I've been lucky enough to have a couple of those moments on films. So, but that one, to me, that one still is probably my favorite moment during production. No
Hmm.
question.
Nice. Looking at production, I would just be kind of curious to hear, like, when you came to the days where you were filming these big musical numbers, like, what did a day on set look like? Because I'm sure those days were very different than your average uh film production day that most people are used to.
Yeah, this one in particular, because the screenplay that was written, and we all kind of chimed in and chipped away at it. But it was mostly written by Alan and a talented writer named Kaylee Bailey. On day one, again, if you remember the movie, on day when Bailey goes to this garden that they've
Hmm.
created for her mother who's passed away. It's a nice moment, and she ends up with Kevin, with Will, and that then turns into A Place in This World. They sing that, so it's a duet. That version's a duet, and then they end up dancing on the dock, and it's sunset and all the things. It's beautiful.
Hmm.
That moment, and this is day one, literally day one. We're sitting there
Wow.
going, oh my gosh, that was incredible. We have a movie that is much more emotional, much more grounded than the script we have.
Hmm.
Because from day two to day 21 or whatever we had on that was gonna be a lot of comedy, a lot of hijinks, a lot of goofy stuff because it's a summer camp movie, right?
Right.
And I remember we all stepped aside for a second at the end of the day and just said, looking at what we're shooting tomorrow and looking at the pages and going, oh gosh, this is funny on the page, but I'm not sure this is ever going to match
Hmm.
the the beauty of what we just shot, the emotion of what we just shot. We may have to revise this screenplay, and we're in day one. We just finished day one, and now we're looking at a screenplay that doesn't fit tonally with what we just shot. Or I should say it differently, we now had a different perspective on the movie we were making, and
Okay.
we now needed to revise the screenplay to fit our expectations and that perspective. And so, yeah, it was crazy. Alan and I were rewriting that script every single night, and we're wrapping. Sometimes if we're shooting during the day, we're wrapping at 8. We're working on that screenplay till 2 in the morning, and then back at it on set at 6 a.m., handing new pages to the actors. And to our filmmaker. That is not ideal. In fact,
Mm.
that's crazy, is what it is. It's crazy, but
Yeah.
it was necessary. And look, the scenes were all the same scenes, right? It's not like
Hmm.
we pulled big chunks and back to what I said early about my career, thankfully, I had had enough experience developing screenplays and producing movies that I knew you can't just add stuff at this stage.
Yeah.
Your art department will never be able to figure it out. The ADs will never, nobody will be able to figure it out. Every single department will be looking at you like you're a crazy person, and we were, but I knew enough to say, all right, well, the pieces are here. We just need to modify these pieces, and it really ultimately kind of rolled down to the actors being
Hmm.
okay with having to pivot a little bit, learn their new lines, and luckily we had great actors, and also be Roman being flexible enough to change his vision a little bit to capture this new version of the movie. So yeah, dude, it was like, man, it was insane. It was insane the way we had to revise this thing on the fly.
Yeah. So I have to ask, because obviously starting with that whole scene on day one that you're talking about, like that's a big scene. And I know there's a lot of people that are like, when you start a movie production, start with something easy. Like,
Yeah.
uh, I'm just curious if you remember why you started with such a big part of the film as opposed to something maybe a little more chill.
Yeah, I mean, A Place in This World is also such a beloved song that if we
Hmm.
didn't get that right, it would have been a big problem. So it's a very good question. But the reality for us is that when you're and if you've made a film and you'll know what I'm talking about, you only have so many days,
Yeah.
right? And on most of these films, your movie's a lot bigger than the time you have to make it. So
Hmm.
you have to do it. Like it's at the end of the day, it's like we started with that scene because it was 2 actors and not 50. We started with that scene because it was a pretty simple art department setup with the garden, and then
Hmm.
them kind of just running through the forest and on the dock. from a production perspective, it was the most chill you could start with. From a performance perspective, it was big. It was really
Yeah.
big because it's such an important song. And it's such an important moment in the movie. But I would rather. And the truth is, we had so much faith in our cast, and we had rehearsed it so much
Hmm.
that we felt pretty confident we were going to get something really good. We didn't. You never know what you're going to get, but we got lucky and we got something pretty magical from those two. And it was, a relatively seamless, eventless. I mean, problematic. Like problematically eventless day. It was smooth. So yeah,
Nice.
we got lucky. Now, not every not every day was like that. We definitely ran
Uh-huh.
into hurdles along the way. But if I'm being honest about all the movies ever made, I would say that A Week Away was probably one of the best production experiences I've had as a producer.
Okay. I also wanted to touch a little bit on the distribution of the film.
Yeah.
Because obviously you ended up getting picked up by Netflix for it. But I'm curious, like, was streaming kind of always the plan for this, or
No.
originally were you going more theatrical?
Definitely, we were definitely focused on a theatrical release for the film. It was such a wild time because we finished the movie, or we finished enough of the film that we were ready to go to market,
Hmm.
and we literally went to market like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the shutdown, before the COVID
Okay.
shutdown, something like that. It was one of those things where, like, obviously we were all caught off guard by COVID, but we
Yes.
had a movie that we were planning on releasing theatrically, and we had interest from a bunch of different theatrical distributors at the time, like right out of the gate, which was really exciting because that's always exciting because you're like, all right, I did not waste my investors' money. We
Hmm.
did something good here. This movie is gonna have a real shot. And then COVID hit and it just, I remember it very clearly, like everyone does. The moment for everybody's probably got their own moment, but my moment
Yeah.
was when the NBA stopped a game like right before tip off. Like the guys were out there about ready to tip off the ball, and they shut it down and told everybody to go home. I was like, wow, our world just changed. What are we going to do about our
Hmm.
movie? Because if they're not going to have sporting events, they're not having movie theaters open.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we had gone to we had already we had let me back it up because we actually did something different for this one than
Okay.
I had never done before, and there was a reason. So what we did is we kind of did pre-meetings. Um, Before we went and shot the movie, I had this idea of doing, because we had music to share, right? We had already recorded the music. We had storyboards done, and we had what I thought was a pretty good selling package to go out to to the studios as well as the streamers. At the time, it was really just Netflix.
Yeah.
Um, I think it was pretty much just Netflix at the time. So we went out to all the studios and Netflix, and I pitched them and I played them the music and I showed them a rip reel and I kind of pitched the movie, but I wasn't there looking for a deal.
Hmm.
This is so crazy now that I think about it, but this is how cocky I was about this movie and confident about this movie I was. I went in and I remember going in and saying, I'm not here looking for money, which from the get go is weird because the
Yeah.
only time you ever meet with a studio or streamer or whatever is when you're looking for money. And I said, I'm not looking for money. We're fully financed. I'm here to tell you what we're doing. We're making this movie, and in 6 to 8 months, I'm going to have a finished film that's going to blow your mind. And I remember saying those things, and I think about it now, and I'm like, that is crazy that I was that confident about this movie. And I remember specifically in Netflix, Nikitha Maddox, who was a friend for a long time prior to this. So I got in there. It was nice to see her again, and we talked about it. She's like, "Are you sure you can make this movie for that number?" I'm like, I'm telling you, we can." And it was also partially to educate them on on the fact that it had never been done before. There had not been a
Hmm.
musical in the faith space. So it was already an oddball thing that I
Right.
felt it was necessary to get in front of these people and give them the vision of the film and the potential business of this film in the Christian space. And yeah, so we went into production with a lot of awareness from the distributors already, and it was really just all about um, making sure that all the arrogance that I had in those rooms before we shot was was delivering on the final product, and it did. You know, I mean, we sent that movie out, everybody wanted it, and COVID hit, and then we decided to do it with Netflix because their offer was irresistible. Even on its own, it was
Hmm.
irresistible. But we factor in that there were no theaters open. We really didn't have. We would be crazy to not have taken the Netflix deal.
Right.
And that was with Nikita. So it was fun to be back uh, working with a friend that I'd worked with, 10 years earlier or something like that. It was a good experience.
Hmm. I bet. Yeah, no, that's cool how that door kind of opened because I know some other filmmakers that, yeah, COVID just really hurt films that they had in the
Yeah,
works. So I got just a few kind of wrap up questions here uh,
yeah.
for you. The first one being if there's people out there listening to this that are wanting to make a musical themselves, what would be a piece of advice you'd give to them?
Spend a lot of time prepping. Get your head all the way around the moving pieces of a musical because there are a lot more moving pieces. When you start bringing, if you're going to have choreography, that is, music is fine. But
Hmm.
if you're going to have choreography in your music in your musical, you need to get ahead of it. You need to get way ahead of it and make sure that you're paying attention all the time because dancing, like stunts, is a different animal altogether. It can be dangerous. It's challenging physically for these folks. Um, it's if it's a union film, you've got a whole new different set of rules that you have to live by. So my advice would be if it's a SAG film, be very aware of the rules for dancers as it relates to rehearsal, as it relates to what they require from a daily perspective in terms of their fees, hazard conditions. I mean, there's a lot of things to be aware of for a musical.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would say pre-production, as much pre-production as you can get. Uh, you'll benefit from it for sure.
Definitely. This next question kind of changes gears quite a bit, but it's the question of the season I've been asking all the guests I've been bringing on, but is on the topic of AI, just because that's taken over the whole industry and all the
Yeah.
conversations. So I just be curious to hear, like, as a producer, your thoughts on like the whole AI conversation and where you kind of see things going or what your thoughts are.
I'm excited about AI, but I'm also frightened by it. It's weird. It's one of those tools that I actively see how it's going to reshape our business,
Hmm.
which is very exciting, especially sitting in the chair that I sit in, where we're financing and producing.
Yes.
Um, I don't know that I'll be as affected if I stay doing this. I don't know that I'll be as affected by it as many departments on a film and TV. I mean, they're eventually, and the guilds are hanging on, and the guilds are fighting a good fight to make sure that AI is not being used
Hmm.
instead of their talent. The Writers Guild has been vocal about that because ChatGPT is an incredibly powerful tool
Yes.
for that. Um, there's a ton of AI sound software that can literally just replace uh, sound design in films. Visual
Hmm.
effects, you see it all day, every day on social media. The stuff that's coming out, from AI in that space is truly incredible with a sliver of the amount of time and a sliver of the cost.
Right.
Um, but even background sounds, I've got good friends who are in loop groups and they've had a very good career doing background sound and voiceover and things like that. Um, I don't know how long that will last.
Hmm.
While Foley, just mostly sound design, but Foley, all of that stuff is just going to be, or I think at some point will just get replaced by AI.
Yeah.
The scary part is when you start having actors, though. When you start seeing AI, and you see it now. I mean, gosh, I mean, every time I go on social media, I'm like, is this real?
Hmm.
I'm not sure if this actually happened. It's
Yeah.
getting it's getting incredibly good, and yeah, I mean, no one really knows where this is going to go or how long it's going to take, but I just don't know how long the unions can hang on and protect their people from being replaced by AI. The hope is that the producers, mostly the studios and independent companies like ours,
Hmm.
will abide by the rules within the guild and be good partners with those guilds and say, listen, if here's like a small example, one that I actually, one that I had to recently make a decision on. Um, you can, and I know you know this. I mean, I think most people who have any idea about AI at this point know that you can take a person's voice and kind of upload versions of their voice into AI, and then
Yep.
the AI will learn the voice, replicate the voice, and you can manipulate the voice however you want. If you want somebody to sound scared, you want them to sound happy, you want them to sound sad, all in that voice. It's truly incredible. And when we were in the marketing of my film Valiant One, there was one moment in particular for a trailer that we were going to do, and we were going to pull audio from the film. But the audio from the film was the actor's voice was started high and went low because he's dying. So he
Hmm.
higher energy and he becomes slower and slower, and the energy gets lower and lower. For the trailer, we needed it to be the opposite.
Yeah.
We needed to build the excitement, not slow it down. So this editor came to me and he said, "Hey, hope you're not mad. I put the dude's voice in and I redid it, and it came back and it was awesome. it was so it was so awesome." And I was like, dude, I'm glad you showed that to me, but we're not using that. We can't use it. Like we'll get
Hmm.
destroyed. We'll get in trouble. And I killed it. But it really was an eye opener for me because, I've never really applied it
Right.
other than using frankly, just chat GPT and like mid journey to create images for decks or whatever. But
Hmm.
to see it in action on my own film with the voice that I had lived with in the edit for 6 months, to hear that same voice manipulated in a way that was so different but incredibly effective. I was like, this is scary. This is scary. So yeah, I think my hope is that producers and financiers and the studios will be nice and make sure that the people who that have been riding with them for all these decades and hundreds of years and making creative stuff, actors, musicians, and the tech people, writers, tech people in visual effects and sound design. Hopefully, they will continue to honor that and move forward and work together to see how we can use AI
Yes.
rather than just replacing people.
Yeah. No, that would be the dream for sure.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. I don't think it will happen that way, but
Yeah.
that's my
Sadly,
hope. That's my hope.
sadly, it
History,
probably won't.
history is usually a pretty good guide when it
Yes.
comes to how technology can and will be used.
So then my final question for you is just for people out there that are just getting started on their journey as a film producer, what would be a piece of advice you would give to them?
The great thing about our world today compared to when I came up and I did a version of this. It just wasn't there just wasn't as much information available as
Hmm.
there is now. But you have to be obsessed about the creative process of making films, but also the business side of making films. There's so much online behind the scenes. I just watched the behind the scenes of Saving Private Ryan again last night. I watched it a bunch of times because it's one of my favorite films, and I'm just so blown away by what they accomplished from a producerial
Hmm.
aspect of that film, building that, the town at the end and the amount of wardrobes and just everything about that film is incredible to me. And the good news is it's just a click away. You can see what they did. You can learn how it's done from the greatest filmmakers of all time. These master classes that Scorsese does, and Aaron Sorkin talks a lot about his process and what he's done. There's so much out there that you can get educated by and excited by. So I would just say be completely insatiable when it comes to taking in information, taking in um, what the greats are willing to share about how it's made and how things are done. I also think for a producer, I think you have to think on the other side of the equation too. Like I said, storytelling is one thing, but the financing and the distribution, the marketing, and all of the things that go along, all the things that allow you to be creative has to have as much attention as the creative side. So,
Hmm.
and again, there's a ton of information out there about that. All you have to do is go on deadline.com and read articles about projects that are in production or being picked up at film festivals, or tax credits that are being offered and or modified, changed, or even canceled. Like, read about the business of the business. And you match that with, like I said, a massive appetite for creativity, and I think you'll be fine.
Nice. Yeah, that's some great thoughts here to wrap up on. So we'll go ahead and call cut on this episode of the Producer Podcast. So thanks once again, Steve, for taking the time to come on today.
Thank you for having me, man. This was fun. I really appreciate it.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Producer Podcast. Come back next week for our can't miss mid-season finale of the show as our journey to episode 100 continues. Until then, make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.